My family disowned me, and friends started to think that I was a pariah, couldn't fit into the new community, unemployed, and I fell into depression. Right? It's a very different message to when he goes and says, I became Muslim, and they told me I was their brother. But when I went to them for help, they turned me away.
Tony or Saleh Whelbourne is a gardener, an artist, but probably better known as the founder of Muallif, a grassroots initiative in Nottingham, supporting new Muslims in their journey to Islam. However, we both share a journey to light from darkness and many discontents with the situation of new Muslims in Britain. However, he's got brilliant ideas and puts them into action. I wanted to talk about his journey, what he thinks about social issues in Britain, and the concept of community. How do we build community? And can we start something if we're only one person? For starters, actually, can you say a little bit about the initiative itself? You know, the aims, the intention, when and why it was created, what you've achieved so far?
Muallif, as an idea, is inspired by a verse in the Quran that identifies the 8 categories of zakat. So amongst the 8 categories of zakat are the mu'allafat, those whose hearts are to be reconciled. The mu'allif, more commonly, the word refers to an author or one who brings things together. So in the context of an author, it's somebody who brings knowledge together and reconciles the knowledge with the reader and promotes understanding. The mu'allif can also be the person that reconciles hearts or brings people together. So the mu'allafat, with a mu'allaf, not lif, in the Quran, is the one who needs what they call heart work. Normally it refers to people that are new to Islam, or who are on the fringes of Islam, or who have weak faith and they need to be brought in. The mu'allaf is the one who needs that work. The mu'allif is the one who facilitates that. And the reality is that we're all, in some degree, pendulating between the two. The mu'allif linguistically, it also means to bring community together. It can be used in that sense. And from that perspective, Muallif aims to co-serve. We use this word co-serve. So it's about collaboration, but we came up with a brand language, co-serve, amongst our colleagues in the domain and community stakeholders to better resource collaboratively the well-being, sound Islamic literacy and leadership development, for want of a less corporate sounding tagline there, future success of converts to Islam in particular, but we actually work with converts and their families. My journey in community service in this domain is in the region of 20 years. I've been in this domain as a beneficiary, as a community servant. This particular project's taken on a few different iterations. It really began just before the pandemic, after we'd experimented with some programs. And then unfortunately our activities were interrupted by the pandemic. And we're in the process of repotting Muallif. We're in the process of replanting it and bringing it back to life after our activities were interrupted.
So I understand it's quite interwoven with your personal journey in a way, right?
Yeah.
But you mentioned something I find interesting. People who embrace Islam are a recipient of one of the categories of recipients of zakat. Muslims in the UK are some of the most generous donors of zakat. We are talking about figures oscillating between 700 millions, 1 billion, depending on the years and the sources and the statistics, given to charity. Why don't people give to your kind of initiatives or to help people who are new to the faith?
Fundamentally, with respect to this category of the mu'allafat, those whose hearts are to be reconciled or brought near, amongst the 4 mainstream Sunni schools, there's a difference of opinion about what it means. That difference of opinion, it really splits into 2 camps. 2 of the schools are of the position that it's only the Muslim leader, like the head of state, that can decide who is mu'allafat, and it was to do with reconciling tribes and communities. So the zakat would be given to a tribal leader who may be close to Islam, or to bring a whole community into a political alliance with the Muslim community. So because of the political dimension, it was only the head of state that could make that decision. That's the Hanbali and also the Hanafi position, right? That only the head of state can do that, and it's about bringing communities together.
Which means, in a way, no caliphate, no zakat for converts.
From that perspective, that's one of the implications. The additional thing is, however, to the Malikis and the Shafis, they say it's got a discrete one-to-one application. So if I know that you're new to Islam, or vice versa, or we have a friend with us who is, and I have zakat, if I know they're entitled, I can give it to them without that the governance of the community being involved. This, actually, I'm not pulling this out of the sky. This was based upon a survey that one of our colleagues in the community did for us, Dr. Suhail Hanif, the CEO of NZF. So he did this survey for us. He did a deep dive on the positions of the fourth school with all of the textual references. The additional complication with there's an additional complication with the Hanafi school, but that's the high-level overview. But it might assist to add the fact that with respect to the Hanafi position, there's two further considerations. A, in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, there's a statement from him that now the Muslims are in a position of strength, there are no mu'allafat, right? Because we don't need to reconcile the hearts of these people that are weak in faith, because now we're a strong community, right? People want to be Muslim, they want to be with us. So there's a statement that the Hanafis rely on that says that Umar ibn al-Khattab suspended that category. That's the first implication there as well. Secondarily, in the UK, we're overwhelmingly a Hanafite nation with regards to the four schools. That's a numbers game, because so many of our brothers have come from South Asia. So India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, overwhelmingly Hanafi. So you've got this to overcome in advocating for zakat to be used for converts to Islam, even if in the other schools there is a precedent for it.
Okay, and do you think so? This is mainly because of jurisprudence and these interpretations. There's no other reasons.
I think there are other reasons. The pound, it can quantifiably do more in third world country, for example. £70 might help with like a welcome pack for a new Muslim. That gives them some basic resources. Maybe you give these resources and they're supplementary to some classes, and maybe the classes go through the materials that you provide them. Maybe £70, £50 to £80. But then how many staple meals can that provide for somebody in Yemen or Gaza? So whilst we've got domestic priorities, there is a mindset where the money can go further. And I think sometimes my experience of working with the NGOs is that that's often why their support isn't sustained. We've had some support. Other organisations have had support as well over the years, but it seems to be precarious.
How did your personal experiences led to the creation of your initiative? And there's one concept you talk about which I find interesting is, I can't get it right, but it's high quality, high maintenance. I mean, about quality and maintenance of.
So I didn't come up with this.
Yeah.
An old friend of mine wrote a book. He came up with this idea of the high quality, low maintenance convert and the high maintenance, low quality convert, right? So you've got high quality, low maintenance, easy converts to deal with. We've got the high maintenance, low quality, too many complex needs. And what he appeared to be advocating for, although I think he's more sensible than this, is that we don't want high maintenance, low quality converts coming into Islam. We only want high maintenance high quality, low maintenance converts. We don't want people with complex needs. We want people that are going to come to Islam. They're going to follow the rules. They're going to be serious students of knowledge, and they're going to get on with it, right? And so the idea being that we should be selective in our dawah. We should only seek to bring people in that are going to be of benefit to the community. And this is coming from a convert himself. My position is that Islam is a shifa. Islam provides the resources to heal individuals and communities. And so it's for the people with complex needs as well, right? And we should never preclude somebody from reciting the Shahada and joining our community. But it is indicative of one of the issues within the subculture of conversion, that we like the high quality guys and we don't like, and girls, but not so much the high maintenance ones.
That echoes a lot of my personal experiences and experiences of my friends who, who happen to be very, very high quality people. But because, they're just of the wrong socioeconomic class, they're the wrong skin color, they don't get the support they deserve, and their talent is literally wasted because they have to survive and there's no one else to support them. Is this something you've observed as well, that there is kind of a hierarchy of reverts to Islam?
Yeah.
How can we explain that? What is the reason according to what you've seen?
There are going to be, because you're Dr. William Barrilow, so I think, this
I'm the wrong kind of doctor. People have told me that.
But I think to some extent this is rhetorical on your part, because it's things are changing because of the conversations that communities are having and the advocacy that's taking place. But there's been a trend, and this is corroborated by research, okay, which maybe we can discuss. So this isn't just somebody with an axe to grind. There's a trend that there seems to be a hierarchy with respect to race and class with converts in the community. And the pecking order normally goes white, black, brown, in terms of the way that converts are respected. And it's also class as a dynamic. So if you're from a particular class, if you're middle class, or more than that, upper middle class, materially, you have a comfortable social location, then you tend to be treated differently to people that maybe are working class, or even, to use the socialist term, amongst the precariat, people that are not employed or who are not in stable work. So, but that's where the zakat could really be transformative, or where Islam can be really transformative. South Asian Sikh and Hindu converts are often totally hidden, right? And often because of partition and the conflict in South Asia, they're having very difficult experiences becoming Muslim. Then, of course, you've got anti-blackness, and thereafter you've got the class dynamics and the different categories of whiteness, the way people are racialized as white. But brown converts are often the most invisible. Black converts often have experienced challenges with anti-blackness in the South Asian community, and then it's the whole thing of white privilege that we have to take inventory on.
So what in your personal journey, your observations, have led you to create your initiative? What was the thought journey, I would say?
What I see is that race and class are not the only way people are marginalised in a society. The scale to which different populations are marginalised because of their social location can differ. So if you're incarcerated or institutionalized as a white person, that can lead to marginalization, no question. And the systems that can cause you difficulty, you start to see, oh, this I'm getting a flavor of what my brown or black counterparts are experiencing. it's important to note that if a white person speaks about marginalisation in the UK, right, we have to think about, the scale of the problems and how it's not an equivalent to how other communities might be marginalised. Shortly after I became Muslim, I was institutionalised for almost 10 years, and I went through a journey of recovery and resettlement. That's at the top level. And I actually started work on this project shortly after I was no longer institutionalised, very shortly after. For the best part of 15 years, I think from the age of 21 to 35, I was not employable. I didn't have work. I was on disability living allowance. I was institutionalised. And one of the things this project has given me is given me a way to re-enter into society. So there was a motivation because I saw, particularly where I'm coming from, in England, in Nottingham, surrounded by post-industrial Britain, black, white, and brown, surrounded by lots of different types of converts, and I saw lots of people becoming Muslim, looking for support, not getting it, and I felt myself amongst them. So you might say, in some terms, that I was a lived experience leader, right? And I took a big risk. Really, I've boxed above my weight. I've disrupted. I've stepped on people's toes trying to get this project launched. But it's what I went through personally. I've just glossed over it. But it's what we can perhaps go into more detail. But it's what I went through personally and what I saw other people going through that made me think, we need more action taken with respect to dawah. We talk about dawah in the Muslim community, right? But we don't talk about the consequences of dawah, what happens next. And we need to have more resourcement around this. So there's born out of lived experience, what I went through, what I observed others go through, but then it was really corroborated by some research we took in whilst I was in this kind of liminal space between being formally institutionalized and then resettling back into community properly. I took part in some research, and that really opened my eyes to how widespread some of the challenges are that the convert community / population face.
I wonder if we were to be a bit more selective, if there is something in particular within the frame of your initiative that you have experienced with which you thought was that was pretty challenging.
One of the things that's been really challenging is coming into Muslim civic society, dealing with the culture of gatekeepers and dealing with a phenomenon that really disquiets me. We espouse the values of community, right? And we say explicitly we're a community. We have these Islamic values of rahmah, futuwa, khidmah, right? Of mercy, of deference to the other, brotherhood, sisterhood, service. But as soon as you start getting into Muslim civic society, you realize that actually what we've done, we've created these organizations, which are these incorporated legal entities, and they damage the spirit of community. So we have to be clear. We've said this elsewhere. We'll say this might be one of our core messages, but the incorporated entity, the legal entity, is a tool for the community, like any other tool that we might use, a premises, for example, but it isn't the community. An incorporation is not a community. It's a tool for the community. And what happens is, because of the nature of, and I really think it comes from a scarcity mindset, that suddenly, rather than dealing with a confluence of interests and working for the greater good, the charities that are emerging, particularly in this domain, appear to be hedging because of a conflict of interest, because they have to protect the entity, the legal entity, the incorporation. And that brings out some poor behavior in our community, which I think has held us back. It's caused harm. And that for me has been an eye-opener. And when I speak to people that have been in this domain a lot longer than I have, they just say, welcome. This is how it is. So I think we need to name and tame that in our work, in our service work, and try to do better.
So how would you remedy to that, or find an alternative to this gatekeeping culture?
Fundamentally, I think it comes back to one's iman. Gatekeepers don't have the keys. Allah has the keys. Right?
It's a good way of saying that, yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. So let people do what they do over there. And if, number one. Number two, we need to, it's really interesting. I've been fortunate, actually, that through the risks that I've taken, some of those risks have paid off. Right? They were the right risks to take. And I find myself being able to, having been unemployed for 15 years, I find myself in a position with the first full-time job that I'm in my mid-40s. I didn't get into work until my mid-30s. And I've met communities, and I've been on tours with different scholars and ulama, and I can go up and down the country and visit communities and understand what's happening. And I always ask for feedback, particularly from scholars that visit from overseas, whether that's the East or the West. And I always, can you give us some advice to the Muslim community in the UK? And invariably, somewhere along the line, the advice will be, there's a lack of ta'awun.
Which means?
Ta'awun, cooperation. Right? So number one, the gatekeepers don't hold the keys. But number two, we need to promote a more authentic, not just pay lip service to it, but we have to have a better culture of ta'awun, right? Of collaboration. Two. Number three, now there's more that could be said, but I'll keep it to three. There's always a risk in bringing people together. Okay? Always. Organizational psychology, there's a model, like a 4-stage model to the health of any organization. And I think it can apply to any relationship. It doesn't have to be used just in the corporate sense. When people come together, there's always a risk, but there's a stage model. People form, they come together, so there's forming. Then there's storming, right? As we start to figure out how we work, maybe what the temperaments of our constituent members of the group are, figuring out how we're going to act together and be together. Then there's norming. So you get through this storming phase, and you start to establish a paradigm within which you're working. And then when you've established some norms, then you can start performing. Then you can start having an impact. And I can see this working in any relationship. What appears to happen is that we never get past the storming stage. So as soon as people attempt to collaborate, we don't know how to collaborate. And as soon as we get to the point where there's friction, sometimes, this friction exists. Well, it always exists on the spectrum. Sometimes there will always be a risk for conflict when you bring people together. Normally it arises in this storming phase. When it comes up, whether it's with a big C or a small c, right, we have to think intentionally about how we respond to that. Too often, even when there's small things that could be easily resolved, it poses an existential threat to the collaboration and to the cooperation. And we don't have a healthy culture of accountability, restoration, or repair, right, when these things go wrong, right? And we're worse off because of it. So the third thing that I would say, we need to be more intentional and in our promotion of a culture of accountability and repair when we have conflict, because that's always a risk of bringing people together. And you see, the gatekeepers often, they think they're above that, so they don't engage, and that causes damage, and it stymies our. From that perspective, you know, it stymies our development. But it's all within the plan of Allah. We have to be content with Allah's decree, and we have to have adab with that, and we have to take the right action. We have to meditate on that and take the right action.
Yeah, it's interesting that everyone who comes to the UK from outside notices the same thing.
Same thing.
I guess, you know, there's divisions everywhere. I've seen that in France. I've heard about this in the US, but it feels like the UK somehow on another level. We are in this paradoxical place where we are looking for a community. We talk about community, but when it comes to in practice, it's been a lot of times in my life I was wondering, where is this community, especially here in the UK? But how has it been for you, the search of a community? Have you found a community, if you think there is one?
Yeah, I think I found community.
How did that happen?
You look into, if it's what you want, you look until you find it. That's how it happened. Like, it's what when I came into Islam, I don't know. There's so many influences where this came from, but we were sold on the idea that Islam could transform the communities that we emerge from, depending upon where your social location and where you are materially or socio-economically. You know, the concept of transforming the community that you emerge from may seem abstract, you know. Sometimes when I talk about Islam transforming the communities that we emerge from, I see some people scratch their head. Our communities are doing all right. I come from a community that wasn't doing all right. So we were sold on the idea that there's a social responsibility. It's not just about the private worship, but there's a social mandate. And so I was with initially, I would say I've not just found community, I found communities. So we're in Nottingham, we do have a community of people that come together that are reading from the same page, and it may be of a modest size, but we do come together and we serve together, and there are people there that have your six, they have your back. And that for me is what being in a community really means. It means that this place is a refuge for me. These are my people, they have my back. But that might not be a lot but then you have to manage expectations. You know, it's, you know, what's the scale of the people in that community that have really got you? It might just be a handful of people. Community could be just a few people. Sometimes, like, I think we're infected beside this idea of like the big think, you know, or thinking big. We're trying to boil the ocean. You know, like, community has to be this big dynamic thing where we're all united. It doesn't need to be that. It could be just small pockets or enclaves of people with shared interests and shared values. But fundamentally, I think we have to be, for us to be an authentic community, whatever the scale of it is, we have to be invested in each other's, so not just our spiritual well-being, but also our material well-being, right? When we have these dysfunctions in any sector, there are people and families that experience material consequences to these dysfunctions, right? And so we have to apprehend these things and think about the material consequences of how we operate as, or don't operate as, a community. I feel like I'm being a bit discursive, but yes, I found community, or I found communities where I fit in. It took a while, but it's because I was actively seeking it, and I still believe in the power of community, and that we need to be intentional and create environments for community. I'm still passionate about that idea, and so you keep looking until you find people that care about that, and then you start to organize and you start to do what you can.
Why is that some people, you know, when it comes to new Muslims, they have a very abrupt approach to the religion, which means that, you know, when you embrace the faith, some people expect you to be Jannah ready 24 hours after your Shahada. Where do you think it comes from? If you have witnessed it,
because they're poorly educated, and I don't mean like because they don't understand how it should be done. right? And because they haven't been through it. So I could have a friend, Abdul Rahman, right, or Ali from the local mosque. He's born into a Muslim family. Maybe he's had his tests in life and he hasn't practiced for a long time. Maybe he has a corner shop that sells alcohol, right? And, we don't know people's circumstances, so it's not to look down on people. But he could go through his whole life, he could go through 2/3 of his life as a non-practicing Muslim. But when he dies, he'll get a janazah. He'll get a Muslim burial. Where you could be a convert to Islam. And if you're not ticking the right boxes, people will question your commitment and you don't have the same social capital within the context of the Muslim community. Because the bar is set different for converts. Often, we expect people to take on a lot. This is a problem of perspective. And I think it's a misunderstanding of the manhaj al-nabawiyah, like the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there were so many examples. The whole religion came a precept here, a precept there, over a period of 23 years. But we're asking people to commit, understand, process, implement, change 23 years of revelation in 24 hours. Right? We have to take a progressive approach with people. We don't want to stymie people if people are enthusiastic, but there's narrations where even the Prophet ﷺ said, if a person takes on this whole matter at once, it will break them. So I like to talk about Islam more like a martial art than going to church, for example, right? Or going cold turkey. There's a path, there are things to attain. But first of all, you come into the dojo, you learn how to tie your belt and wear your gi, you learn the protocol of sitting with a teacher, and you learn your foundations, and it's a daily practice. And then you get better at the practice, and you start realizing the nuances of the practice, and you become more sophisticated in your practice. But it's a thing that's measured in years, not in days. A realization of the fruit of the practice. You might get glimpses of it early on, but for it to really penetrate you, it can take years. It's something that's measured longitudinally.
You sound like someone who's done martial arts.
A little bit.
Which one?
Huh?
Which one?
Okay, might be more appropriate to ask which ones I haven't done. But I'm also very much out of practice. I'm very sedentary at the moment. And I don't want to pick a fight with anybody right now because I'll probably get knock spark out.
In terms of your journey, what, in your opinion, helped you to heal and recover from all these tough times you went through?
Allah sent me good teachers and mentors at the right time.
I think, teachers and mentors can be a catalyst because they act as a guide, but they also have a part of the work to do by yourself, I guess.
I think I'm still doing the work. So, look, we've glossed over it. Here's what happened. I became Muslim just before 9/11. Right? Now, I come from a military family. My mum was born in Yemen, in Aden, in a military base. My grandmother, her mother, grew up in a military base in Iraq, right? I've got family that fought against the Somalis. I married a Somali, that didn't go down well. I've got an uncle my stepfather was in the TA. My uncle's in the TA. I had another uncle in the BNP. Now, I'm not saying that, if you're white working class military, you're automatically right wing and racist. But there is a subculture there. Let's not be naive. So I come from a white working class military family. I became Muslim just before 9/11, months before 9/11. So in the first year of my Shahada, this global crisis kicked off, and suddenly the Muslim community were public enemies under a huge amount of scrutiny. That resulted in, fundamentally, for many of us at that time, being disowned and cut off from our family. The issue was, I was already an at-risk youth. So I had, in my late teens into my early 20s, just before I became Muslim, I had substance abuse issues. And I've come into Islam very intentionally. I wanted to change my life. So I've come into Islam as an at-risk youth. Then I'm going through this process of changing my religion. My family disowned me. And friends started to think that I was a pariah. Also, because Islam was kind of awkward. Couldn't fit into the new community. I'm 20 years old, so I'm a young man, unemployed, right? I hadn't made it to university because of what I'd been going through personally, and I fell into depression. That quickly escalated into more complex needs. Between the age of 21 and 31, I was institutionalized. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar. I was told I had brain damage from the substance abuse. I was diagnosed with anxiety, all of those 5 things in my 20s. So I graduated from being an at-risk youth to a vulnerable adult. And over that 10 years, I was in and out of psych ward, sometimes months at a time. And I was on disability living allowance. Now, for perspective, I'm now in my mid-40s. So I was discharged from the outpatients when I was 31. Okay, and I was first sectioned when I was 21. But that whole decade was me being unwell. Yeah. When I go back to the notes, because I held my nose one time and I asked the doctor for my notes so I knew it was going to be difficult to read before. Let me see. And I read it really early on in the journey. It cited the social consequences of my conversion and the bad reaction of my family as a result of 9/11 as a catalyst for my social isolation that then resulted in my depression. Not to mention the other complex needs that I had. So often when we talk about the consequences of conversion, particularly with the research, the evidence-based needs, the question comes up from critics of that research: how much of this is correlation? How much of this is causation? But when I look at my notes, the professional opinion was, in this instance, conversion was a catalyst for the difficulty that I faced. That's not because of Islam, that's because of prejudice in the adjacent community and the lack of resources and the fact that I was a high maintenance, low quality convert. The turning point for me was finding the resources. So I started off by saying that Allah sent me the right people at the right time. And fundamentally, that's my iman, that's my belief. Against doctor's orders, when I was 28, doctor's recommendations, I enrolled in a fine art degree. So when I was 18 or 19, that was where I was going. I was always artistic and I was getting very high grades in my art. I had a good eye, a good hand. I was doing photorealist portraits. I was also very musical. I played a lot of music. Played a few instruments. So I was on that path, but I got interrupted. So after some time, and as I started to get more highly functioning, more independent, although I was still on disability living allowance around the age of 28, I was walking past Nottingham Trent University one day. I saw the applications were open for the degree, and I thought, I'm going to apply. Because I was starting to realize I can't spend the rest of my life in this way. So I took that plunge against doctor's advice, because the doctors was like, you're not capable of doing a degree. I enrolled at university. It took me 7 years to get my bachelor's. I didn't graduate till I was 35. But in that time I got discharged. I met some good mentors. And then I eventually got predicted a first class degree. But it was a combination of, I think, immersing myself in that studio environment and doing hardcore occupational therapy, finding good guides and teachers, some of them who were healers and taking their advice seriously. I'll come up for air, but there were one or two healers in particular, Muslims. But the advice that they gave me was so personalized and bespoke. I feel that as soon as I acted upon it, my recovery began to progress a lot quicker. But yes, I think it was a combination of me becoming more highly functioning, identifying a pathway for myself, self-directed, and finding the mentors and the grace of God that got me out of that position by my mid-30s.
Healed healer.
The healed healer. I'm still healing. I'm still healing.
I think we are all. It's an ongoing journey.
Bismillah. The good news was, I want this on the record. When I was 31, all of the previous diagnoses were rescinded apart from depression and anxiety. So they said, that was the good news. When I got discharged at the age of 31, they were like, we've got no concerns. And alhamdulillah, that's been the case. I've had to struggle with those latitudes, but they're very common, right? Yeah. And they require a lot less complex treatment.
Anything you would like to add on any topic you think is important?
I think it'd be good to talk about the research on the domain of conversion, the extractive nature of community research, the problem with the only recommendations being the next piece of research, the need for advocacy in that respect from community stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion, it's not going to be much different from what you've probably observed, in the sense that if you look at research, academia in general, it's always been very, very extractive here in Europe and North America, because there's no culture of doing action research. It's, as you said, it's very extractive. That people don't. People literally do research on people instead of doing research with people. So the researchers, there's no giving back or giving anything, They do their research, they don't give the findings back to the communities they've been doing research on. And that's a massive problem. When there's collaborations between research centers or researchers and community organizations, there is very, very little compensation given to this research. And here, academia has been constructed as something informing policy, which is a complete lie, because unless you know someone personally who is doing policy work, there's very little chance it's going to go somewhere. I know some researchers, it's very rare, they do campaign themselves, they lobby themselves, they set up organization themselves, but again, is the exception more than the rule, meaning that most of the research which is produced is condemned to gather dust somewhere in a forsaken library, sadly. There's no funding given, there is no people write, for policymakers, but I think, there is not even, or very rarely, recommendations to the people who are on the ground, which means that, organizations, especially at the grassroots, are condemned to do the work by themselves and figure out the solutions almost by themselves, unless someone has the time to go and read the research, or, go beyond the paywall, because there's so much articles are behind a paywall, and not everyone, especially grassroots people, are sometimes in survival mode. How can they find the time to make the effort? Go online, find a PDF of an article. It's it's a structural blockage that is almost put in place for grassroots organization, specifically, those we're talking about.
You see, the reason I sort of directed the conversation this way is that we need to advocate for the work that we do, and there are now 20 years of reports. So since 9/11, although conversion scholarship, it goes back further than this. Since 9/11, there's been a lot more interest, particularly through British Muslim studies. I think we've said this before. We'll say it again. Particularly in British Muslim studies, there's a lot of interest in the convert population. So we get 1 or 2 new reports a year. And we're seeing a number of recurring problems. So since the time of the Sahaba, we see that people can react badly to conversion. You know, just read the life of the Sahaba, read the life of the Prophet's companions, see the challenges that they faced. Some people shut up and they excelled very quickly, but many of them, they had to deal with a lot of fallout, sometimes conflict and violence as a consequence. And what we're seeing is everything from domestic violence, disinheritance, marriages breaking down, women being groomed into sham marriages, people having a loss of income, you know. We see that there's maybe 10 or 15 recurring issues coming up. And with respect to the issue of correlation or causation, many of the issues are reported to be as a consequence of the conversion. Because of the challenges that we have with respect to zakat, right, and the Hanafi position, well, we have to find practical solutions. Because with respect to social isolation, poor well-being, or financial hardship, material consequences, and these, according to the research, being the three main areas within which all of the other problems are folded up. Well, zakat could have an impact on all of these areas. But if we're going to preclude the convert population from having a specialist pathway to benefit from that, even though there's a precedent in the Book of Allah, then there are a couple of workarounds. Number one is, if you're Hanafi, you take a position from another school. Number two is, identify those members of the convert population that might be eligible through some other means, through some other category, right? You don't have to preclude them from zakat, because they might be zakat eligible from another reason. They might have debt, they might be poor, they might be destitute in some other way. So we can still collect and distribute zakat and help the convert population, those of them that are struggling as a consequence, which is the rationale behind the mu'allafat. And even through those other categories, we can fulfill the spirit of that category and bring people together. I want to close with one case study and then inshallah make a closing statement. There's many case studies that we could talk about. During the time of the EDL, the English Defence League, we met a convert. He'd become Muslim in prison. He's a white working class guy. So he's coming from a community that has a statistically high chance of having Islamophobic or anti-Muslim sentiment. He becomes Muslim in prison. He gets a painting and decorating qualification. He comes out of prison and he gets signposted to a mosque that says it's collecting zakat for new Muslims. So he goes with a proposal that if you fund me with some zakat, I can get a van, I can get a ladder, I can get some tools, I can start to earn halal. The mosque turns him away. It's unclear in defense, to be objective, it's unclear whether that was because of a lack of zakat resource or for some other reason. There's a possibility that the zakat wasn't being used properly, but he gets turned away. In cases like that, not only could we be using our sadaqah and zakat to empower young people, help them come out of poverty, men or women, we could also be reconciling and building ties with adjacent communities. Because when he goes home to John or Dave or Alan, his father or his uncle, he says, I became Muslim and they really looked after me. Right? It says a very different message to when he goes and says, I became Muslim and they told me I was their brother. But when I went to them for help, they turned me away. So this fringe work, this work of Islam from the edge, this looking at the even metaphorically, where does the territory of Islam end socially? Where does and what's happening in that liminal space? If we can use zakat and we can organize strategically in that domain, we could see lots of positive changes and healing taking place in our community. And inshallah, this is our mission. And inshallah, thank you for for hosting us to talk a little bit about our origin story today.
The good news is there's always a way out somehow.
We have to have
it takes
faith, yeah. We have to have faith.
Yeah, there's always light at the end. So thank you very much, and to the audience, thank you very much for watching.